There's a lot of research out there to prove that part of what we experience as empathy, when we can feel what someone else is feeling, is actually a direct result of mirror neuron activity. Our brains are mirroring what's happening in their brain. Welcome to the Love Your Brain podcast, the podcast designed for everyday people who are ready to hop off the negative thought hamster wheel and enjoy a less hostile environment in their own brains. Our brains are where we live our entire lives, and I'm on a mission to help people see that they have everything they need to make it a happier place to be. So join us for this episode of the Love Your Brain podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Love Your Brain podcast, or welcome if you're new. Now, before we dive into today's topic, I do want to remind you that we have started our free online community for Love Your Brain podcast listeners, the Love Your Brain podcast community. I'll have the link in the show notes below, but we would love to have you there. In this community, you can connect with other listeners, join in on the discussion where I'm hoping we can start some cool post-podcast conversations and just get some more support from each other on our own personal journeys as we work to love our brains more. Feel free to join us. We would love to have you. I also think today's topic is going to help you see why having this community can be extra helpful on your journey, but more on that later. Right now, as I record this, we are a week before Thanksgiving. People are getting prepped for Christmas even. I can see people getting their decorations up, and I know it can be hectic for a lot of people, maybe even chaotic. Or maybe you're someone that's just dealing with a lot of complicated feelings over the holidays. So let's just start today with a collective deep breath. Just in and out. Shake out your arms. Just try and recenter yourself. Just know that whatever you're dealing with today, whatever you're trying to navigate, feel however you need to feel, and know that we're supporting you on whatever journey that you're on today. Now, today's topic is one that I have been diving deep on lately, and I'm hoping it will intrigue you as much as it did me. It's going to be a bit science heavy, so let me know if this type of content is something that you like, is something that's helpful for you. Now, I'm going to introduce this topic to you, or maybe it's something you've already heard about, but today we are going to be discussing mirror neurons. And maybe just from those two words, you can already tell what this is and how this works. But on a very basic level, mirror neurons are our brain's way of mirroring other brains when we observe them. So what this looks like is the neurons that fire in my brain when I brush my teeth also fire in that same way when I watch someone else brush their teeth. And these neurons are also giving us more understanding of another person's experience. It's like being able to feel what someone else is feeling or understanding someone else's next steps just based off of what you see them do, or even understanding the why behind someone is doing something just by observing them, but without any explanation, which is wild. So these mirror neurons are allowing us to watch someone else interact with the world around them and not only gain huge insights, but also be able to mentally experience what they're experiencing in their brain as if we were experiencing it. Now, from what I can tell, there is still a lot of debate on how impactful these mirror neurons really are and the role that they play. Research on the human brain is so challenging, not only because the complexity of the human brain, but also obviously because ethical issues related to doing controlled studies on humans. But to give you some background on this concept, these mirror neurons were first discovered in the 1990s, and they were found in animals. And often in animals, this stuff is easier to detect and understand because their brains function a bit more simplistically than human brains. But starting in the early 2000s and then into like 2010, we started to really be able to pinpoint that this mirror neuron activity was happening in the human brains, just like it was in animals, but maybe with a little bit more complexity to it. So this information is still pretty young, and who knows, 10 years from now, maybe there will be even more information out there that will totally contradict what we know today. But for now, I want to spill the beans on everything that I've learned. There are a few areas where mirror neurons come into play, and they impact how our brains perceive information. One huge area is when it comes to empathy. There's a lot of research out there to prove that part of what we experience as empathy, when we can feel what someone else is feeling, is actually a direct result of mirror neuron activity. Our brains are mirroring in our own brain what's happening in their brain. What they've also found is that extremely empathetic people have almost overactive mirror neurons, which is fascinating. But it makes sense, right? Like if mirror neurons are allowing us to have this experience of empathy, then obviously people who are having a very intense experience of empathy probably have more of that mirror neuron activity happening. And on the flip side, they also found that there are connections between people with less mirror neuron activity and people who have difficulty following social cues or social norms, which is really interesting. Like those people who can't read the room might actually have less mirror neuron activity happening in their brains, which is actually a good and a bad thing. For example, it really could impact their ability to be accepted in groups or in communities and to have ease in relationships. But on the flip side, they're not distracted by things like peer pressure or societal norms. They don't get distracted by this observing activity and can actually just use more of their brains for other activities. I mean, think about people who grew up in homes where they have been super vigilant, constantly trying to understand the behaviors of those around them because if they didn't anticipate those dangers, they were in threat. Often in those homes where there was abuse or addiction, those are people who probably have overactive mirror neuron activity because they had to be hypervigilant to stay alive. It's stuck in observing for survival. So, in everything, there's a pro and a con, even when it comes to mirror neurons. But what I really find fascinating about what this research is showing us is that our brains don't just observe behavior and then mimic it, it's way bigger than that. Our brains observe behavior and then it can actually just immediately have understanding as to the why. We can understand another person's reasoning why they performed an activity without any explanation. But it makes sense in a lot of ways that why we would have something like this running in the background of our brains, especially when you look at how we have such complex interactions and societal norms, where so much information is being communicated about expected behaviors without ever speaking. I mean, no one sat down and literally gave you an entire litany of the list of all of the things that you should do in life to be accepted, right? A lot of this is just being absorbed via observation. I heard someone recently talk about mirror neurons affecting parenting in such an impactful way. And it really makes sense because so much of parenting is done non-verbally. A parent communicates with their child in so many ways without explicitly saying anything. So the child's mirror neurons are filling in all the gaps as to the why behind behaviors, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me. But it makes sense in so many settings why we spend a lot of time with certain people. We start to not only simply act similar, but we also gain understanding for them and newfound empathy in many ways. I can tell you, as someone who has worked in a profession where I've had a lot of exposure to people who have committed serious crimes. And what's really interesting is that I don't often even need to have them explicitly tell me why they became a criminal or all of the things that have happened to them in their life. But just after observing them for periods of time, you actually start to gain empathy and understanding just from being exposed to an experience where I'm observing them, which makes sense, again, with this mirror neuron discovery. Now, what's really important to note is this is all happening without us knowing. We don't have to think about it, it's just happening in the background of our minds, which is the part of our brain that's automatic, like a machine, which is the part that I love to learn about. So much time is spent only addressing parts of the brain where we perceive we can control what's happening, but there's so many parts of the brain that we can control that we haven't even discovered yet. And it does give us clues into how we can use this machine of our brain in ways to benefit our own journey more. We can, especially as adults, choose who is in our circle. We can choose not only to surround ourselves with people who we want to behave more like, but also people that we want to understand better, people that we want to have a better comprehension of the why behind what they do. And that applies to people that maybe you're struggling to have empathy for, right? With this information, we understand that by exposing ourselves to observing those people, we can actually help to bridge that gap and build in compassion. But in terms of self development, how cool is it that you can find someone that inspires you and spend more time around them or even just observe them? And not only learn from what they're saying, but your brain will also automatically start to help you put in the pieces that are missing to help you understand the why of what they do. You guys know I'm always trying to give you tools to help you take control of how your brain works by understanding it better. And to me, mirror neuron discovery has been a huge part of the program. There's just so much we don't know, but from this, we can start to use this information for our good. Now, a couple ways I see this being beneficial. One is to use this to help you build your circle. Because, like our parents told us, the people that we surround ourselves with do, in fact, have an impact on how our brains work. I know it's irritating, they were right. But truly, as an adult, you can start to pick the people you want your brain to imitate, which is so cool. And even cooler, from what science is saying here, is we actually just have to observe. And in today's culture, we have access to observing all kinds of people, not just people we know in real life, but people we can observe from TV or social media, anywhere. So the world really is your oyster in this regard. You have access to so many different types of people to observe. And with this information, you can really select what you are spending your time observing with intention. You can choose to consume information about people's lives from people you know you want to mirror. And on the flip side, you can also now look a little more critically at the ways you spend time observing people that maybe is just brain numbing and not helpful. Now, I want to interject here for a second and just say that I think being super selective of who we observe for entertainment or for targeted learning is important. But also be careful to apply this same idea to all of the people in your circle, all of the interactions that you have with other humans. And I say that because there is something I've seen as a trend that scares me a bit. And that is that our culture has gotten really good at boundaries, almost too good, and we've started to let our pendulum swing to a place where anyone we think is toxic or not good for us, we just cut them out. And over time, what I see is just more and more isolation, which is honestly way more detrimental in many ways. Not to mention, sometimes we're saying we're putting boundaries in place, but really what we're doing is just avoiding the hard work of addressing difficult things, addressing conflict. It's kind of like the balance between, oh, I'm going to let myself rest because it's good for my body, but also not letting the pendulum swing so far where your rest becomes too much. It actually starts to become harmful. We have to be careful to balance these things. So, with this new information about mirror neurons, I hope you don't take the information and just look at everyone in your circle and just like decide, oh, I'm cutting them all out. They're not helpful. It's not really what we need to be doing. In fact, what I also want you to hear about mirror neurons is also the amazing ability it gives you to feel and understand others better. This is truly a superpower. Can you imagine, for example, what would happen if leaders of countries fighting with one another had some time to just spend together observing one another? Well, we know from this research that likely they would start to understand each other better and start to understand why the other person does what they do, possibly even creating space for empathy and connection. Can you imagine how cool that would be? But you are the ruler of your own world as well, so use this as your superpower. Is there maybe someone that you've been villainizing or struggling to love? Take some time to observe them, not in a critical way, but just like you were reading a book or watching a show. Just take in the information, and your own brain can start to do the behind the scenes work of helping you understand and empathize with them better. And another side of this I do want to mention is related to mirror neurons in parenthood, somewhat like I shared earlier, but in a way that should really cause us to pause. And that is, kids are observing and understanding so much more than we think. If you have some trauma still swimming about in your brain, it's likely impacting your behavior without you realizing it. And if your children are around you, or there are just children in general around you, their brains are reading into all of that. Things as simple as maybe you change your clothes 9 million times a day because you're really struggling with loving your body post baby. They are watching you and likely they know why you are doing that behavior, even without you telling them. Or if you are someone who has habits lingering from traumas you've experienced in the past, the children around you likely understand way more of the why behind those behaviors than you think. And so, if you don't think it's worth it to address those things and do it simply for your own good, maybe consider taking time to address those things for those kids that are watching you so they don't have to be exposed to what you were exposed to, maybe. And maybe they can start to see what it means to love yourself unconditionally. That is hard work, let me tell you, but it is such important and impactful work that we can do better for this next generation. So, with all that information, hopefully you can now also see why this new online community we have created for the podcast listeners can be so helpful in your journey. I don't know about you, but I did not grow up in an environment where everyone around me was working on their own mental health or prioritizing building new, healthier neural pathways or addressing their own trauma. That's just something that I wasn't surrounded by. I had little bits and pieces of healthy exposure, but honestly, the people that I grew up around didn't even have the information that we have available today. And as I grew up and as an adult, I had to intentionally seek out connections with people doing that type of work intentionally. And it's a lot of work. And if you're someone that wants more people like that in your circle as well, people focused on those same goals, this community is your chance to not just connect, but also maybe be able to see how others are doing their work as well, how they're working on themselves and working on their own brains. And with mirror neurons, we now know that's going to give you a whole lot of understanding that you may not even realize is happening in the background. It can really help to accelerate your own journey towards loving your brain more. So use the link below to join. Again, it's free. We'd love to have you if you're interested in coming along. Well, that's all for my deep dive today. Hopefully, this provided you some information on the magical stuff that happens in our brains, or maybe some things that you learned that you'll be able to implement in terms of the relationships that you're in or the people you're exposing yourself to. Now, next week, I'm going to dive a bit deeper into this idea of creating your own intentional community in a way you definitely won't guess. So stay tuned for that episode. Trust me, you won't even be able to guess the direction we're going with this one, but it's going to be good. All right, have a great week, guys. I hope you found something helpful here today on the Love Your Brain podcast. Maybe a laugh or a feeling of validation, or maybe just a few moments to have company while you do your laundry. Whatever you take from it, I hope you enjoyed your time and leave feeling empowered to be more you every day. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on the next episode, and leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. Have a great one.